problems we're facing today, Catholic Church or Protestant, but mostly Protestant, are not new. Like, our society is now largely moving towards paganism, where there's multiple gods. This multiplicity of gods and idols is what the early church was facing in Rome when there was tons of gods. Well, how did they present the gospel? How did they live the gospel out? Did it cost them something?
Yeah. How do you feel like the church should be using history to help this generation? I would say, obviously you have youth pastors, but parents, pastors in general, how should we be using history in order to help this generation of Gen Z that's in our churches right now?
Yeah, good question, Josh. History is the only subject that's 3D. It's three-dimensional. It's simultaneously past, present, and future. No other subject has that kind of encompassment. So science, English, PE, foreign languages, whatever. History takes into account all the past. They say all past is prologue for this moment, this present, right? And how we act now and the things we do today influence the future. So history is future, how we're acting now. How we're acting is how we got here. And then we have a decision to make. We have a locus of free will to make a decision. So church history is a 3D subject. And I could talk about church history forever. Problems we're facing today in the church in the West, I'll keep it in the West, and mostly Protestantism. Like, Catholics have 1.6 billion adherents in the world. And I want to say like Protestants are like 1.2 billion. So we're the minority. And in America, I'm not sure what the numbers are, but I'm pretty sure the Catholic Church is the biggest church in America. So when I speak of the American church or the Western church, I'm really only speaking of my experience, which would be Protestantism.
Right.
I would say problems we're facing today, Catholic Church or Protestant, but mostly Protestant, are not new. Like, our society is now largely moving towards paganism, where there's multiple gods. This multiplicity of gods and idols is what the early church was facing in Rome when there was tons of gods. Well, how did they present the gospel? How did they live the gospel out? Did it cost them something? How do they clarify their beliefs so they don't look like a weird, crazy cult? And how do they keep those kind of weird beliefs like the virgin birth or the Eucharist? How do they keep that knowing they're going to be hated on? Like, that's a weird belief. It's like, hey, this is a divine thing. It's not a man-made religion. The early church threaded that needle.
Yeah.
So how can we thread that needle now? We can look back to the past, and our church history can inform us. And there's been so many mishaps and injustices and mistakes that the church has made, the capital C church, from its birth and inception with the apostles till now. And we don't have to make those same mistakes. Most of the stuff we're dealing with has been dealt with in some way, some measure, on some continent at some time in church history. And they did things that were good and did things that, they missed the boat, just like we're doing. He goes, if pastors, or even just, I'll say zoom out and say Christian, if Christians could just look back and say, there's already case studies on this.
Right.
Like, wow. And so Rick Warren goes, 75% of our reading is not modern. It's the past. And C.S. Lewis is a great quote. He says, we need our modern minds to be refreshed by the sea breeze of ancient books. Because you and I have blinders on. We have these cultural, contextual things that we've grown up on: Disney movies, music. How even if you grow up in a different state, Texas versus Alaska versus California versus New York, we're just used to things we don't even realize. One of my master's professors said, history is like a dinner party conversation. And he said, if the dinner party starts at like 6 p.m., and these people are talking, eating, laughing, great conversation, you stroll in at like 11 p.m., they're still talking. If they're going to make references and jokes and bring up subject threads that you're like, what are they talking about? I don't get it. That's over I'm lost, right? Why? You came in 5 hours late, right?
Right.
You missed all that. But if you could be shown a videotape, or someone gave you a recording, a transcription of the conversation from 6 to 11, I'm caught up now.
Right.
You can still contribute at 11 p.m., but you might say something like, well, what about this? And they're like, dude, we covered that 2 hours ago. We already solved that. Oh, okay. But you don't know. So us today, Christians, well, I have something to say about church and church planning or missions or how we should do worship or Bible teaching and doctrine. Like, hold up, homie, you came to the conversation at 11 p.m. The
Right.
church has been having that conversation for thousands of years. And go back further to Old Testament times. It's been having the conversation on God's kingdom and who he is and his character and his interactions with humans for thousands and thousands of years. So we should be humble enough to go, I need to get caught up on this conversation. Like what you say about justice, Isaiah the prophet talked about incredibly much in Job, in
Right.
Isaiah.
Yeah, yeah.
If you feel like you've had sufferings or wrong or life's tough for you, you have affliction and hardship, read the book of Job. Job covered that, and that's thousands of years ago. So every Christian should be somewhat familiar with the general thread of conversation all throughout church history. Those are our forefathers. We're part of them, dude. Don't you want to learn what they did and the mistake? Nah, I just want to start from scratch. Like, okay, you're gonna make tons of mistakes because you don't know. People have made the mistakes for you. Learn from them.
Yeah.
And they've succeeded. You should copy their formula for success.
So what's it look like for you to implement that in like your own church setting, or have you, or what's that look like?